Hey guys, tonight we explore heists and the creme de la creme of heists. Everyone fantasizes about pulling off the perfect heist, walking away with a fortune so vast it defies imagination, then disappearing so completely that no one ever finds you, your money, or even proof you existed. It's the ultimate criminal fantasy, and it almost never works. Almost. Tonight, we explore one of the few people in history who actually did it. Henry Every, the pirate who committed the most profitable robbery in human history, sparked the world's first international manhunt, and then vanished so completely that neither his treasure, his grave, nor even confirmation of his death was ever found. This isn't a story about getting caught with a clever excuse. This is about seizing a floating fortress carrying more wealth than most kingdoms possessed, igniting a diplomatic crisis that threatened to collapse England's entire trade empire, becoming the most wanted man on earth, and then performing a disappearing act so perfect that 3 centuries later, historians still can't tell you if he died rich on a tropical beach or destitute in a gutter. Henry Every didn't just rob an empire. He beat the system so thoroughly that he became a ghost wrapped in legend, proving that sometimes, just sometimes, the perfect crime actually works. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing on the deck of the Charles II in Corunna Harbour, northern Spain, and the stench is almost visible. It's not just the harbour filth, though that's certainly contributing its share of rotting fish guts and human waste. It's the smell of a ship slowly decomposing from neglect. The bilge water has gone stagnant. The wood is developing soft spots where moisture has been eating away at the hull for months. Even the air feels thick with failure, like the atmosphere itself is fermenting into something toxic. You're the first mate, which means you're supposed to keep morale up, but morale is a corpse that's been dead so long you've forgotten what it looked like alive. It's 1694, and you've been anchored here for months, waiting for wages that never arrive, and a Spanish letter of marque that exists only in promises and bureaucratic delays. Here's what you were sold: a privateering mission. Legal piracy, essentially, sanctioned by the Spanish crown to raid French shipping during the 9 Years' War. You'd be a patriot with a license to get rich. The investors back in London, wealthy men with clean hands and expensive wigs, assured everyone that Spain was eager for English help, that the paperwork was a formality, that the profits would be obscene. You signed on as first mate because it sounded like the rare opportunity where duty and fortune aligned perfectly. But those investors, they're back in London, presumably comfortable, definitely not answering letters. The Spanish officials, they smile with the kind of dismissive politeness that makes you want to break furniture. Every meeting is another delay, another excuse, another promise that the letter of marque will arrive next week. It never does. Meanwhile, your wages, everyone's wages, remain unpaid. The ship's stores are running low. The crew is eating ship's biscuits so hard and weevil-infested that you've started thinking of the protein from the bugs as a bonus. The tedium is worse than the hunger. At least hunger gives you something to focus on. This is the special hell of waiting. Days that blur into weeks. Nothing to do but watch the same Spanish harbour, count the same seagulls, play cards with men whose faces you're starting to hate simply because you've been staring at them for too long. The captain, a decent enough man in other circumstances, has effectively given up. He writes letters to the investors that go unanswered. He has meetings with Spanish officials that produce nothing but elaborate shrugs. He stands at the rail and stares at the horizon like he's trying to will a solution into existence. The crew has stopped respecting him, not because he's cruel or incompetent, but because he's impotent. He can't make the investors pay. He can't make the Spanish cooperate. He can't even get the ship moving. And in the hierarchy of a vessel, a captain who can't act might as well not exist. You notice things changing below deck. Nothing overt sailors are too smart to, commit open mutiny when they're trapped in a foreign harbour. But the atmosphere shifts in subtle ways. Conversations stop when officers approach. Men gather in small groups, speaking too quietly. Eyes meet across the deck with a kind of coded communication that bypasses language entirely. You've been at sea long enough to recognise the signs. Mutiny isn't a sudden explosion. It's a slow burn that starts with broken promises and simmers in the space between what men were told and what they're experiencing. The whispers haven't coalesced into action yet, but they're there, hanging in the salt air like humidity before a storm. And here's the thing. You're not trying to stop it. You're watching it with a kind of clinical interest, like a natural philosopher observing a chemical reaction. The turning point isn't dramatic. There's no single moment of clarity, no lightning bolt of inspiration. It's more like a fog gradually lifting. You're sitting in the officers' quarters one evening, forcing down another meal of stale biscuit and cheaper wine, and you have a thought that feels both obvious and revolutionary. You could just take the ship, not in some grand, violent uprising, that's messy and uncertain, but carefully, deliberately, with the support of men who are already halfway to mutiny anyway. The Charles II is a warship, 36 guns, fast and well built despite the months of neglect. She's rotting here because the people who own her don't care enough to use her, but you care. And more importantly, you're starting to realize that maybe ownership is just a story people tell, and stories can be rewritten if you have enough audacity and the right number of armed men agreeing with you. You begin counting allies in the darkness, not openly, you're not stupid, but through careful conversation, testing loyalties with hypotheticals disguised as complaints. How many men are truly loyal to the captain versus merely obedient out of habit? Who among the crew has the skills you'd need? Navigators, gunners, men who can think beyond just following orders. Who's desperate enough, angry enough, or simply bored enough to risk everything on what amounts to organized theft? The answers surprise you. There are more potential allies than you expected. The months of abandonment have done their work, eroding loyalty more effectively than any revolutionary speech could. These men don't want to overthrow a system. They just want to get paid and get moving. You can offer them both, plus something more intoxicating. The possibility of becoming legends instead of forgotten wage slaves. The Spanish bureaucrats continue their theatre of delay. You attend another meeting where a minor official explains, with great regret and elaborate hand gestures, that the letter of marque requires approval from someone in Madrid, who is waiting for authorization from someone else, who is currently unavailable due to illness or travel, or possibly just a general unwillingness to make decisions. You nod politely. You ask when you might expect resolution. He gives you a date that you both know is meaningless. You thank him for his time. And as you walk back to the harbour through streets that smell of olive oil and wood smoke, you're doing calculations in your head. Not of bureaucracy or wages, but of wind patterns, navigation routes, and how many ships you'd need to crew with the men you have. The math is promising. Back on the Charles II, you stand at the rail as the sun sets over Corunna Harbour, painting the water in shades of orange and gold that almost make the filth look beautiful. The ship creaks beneath you, not the healthy groan of a vessel at sea, but the tired settling of wood that's been still too long. You taste the salt air mixed with harbour stench and that awful ship's biscuit that's been your diet for months. Soon, you think, you'll drink like a king. Soon, you'll eat food that doesn't require you to pick out the weevils first. Soon, this rotting warship will have a new name and a new purpose, and the men who abandoned her will learn that the greatest mistake you can make is leaving a ship full of desperate, skilled sailors with nothing to lose and too much time to think. The night is coming, and with it, the kind of opportunity that appears once in a lifetime. If you're brave enough or crazy enough to seize it, you've chosen a moonless night, which feels appropriately theatrical for what you're about to do. The harbour is quiet, except for the usual nocturnal sounds. Water lapping against hulls, distant voices from taverns on shore, the occasional creak of rigging in the breeze. The darkness is so complete that you can barely see your own hand in front of your face, which is exactly the point. Visibility works both ways. If you can't see the other ships in the harbour, they certainly can't see what's happening on the Charles II. You've spent the last week coordinating in whispers, brief conversations in shadowed corners, coded nods across the deck. The plan is simple, which is why it might actually work. Complicated plans have too many failure points. This one has exactly 3 steps. Neutralize the captain, secure the officers who won't cooperate, and get the ship moving before anyone on shore realizes what's happening. The crew you've brought into the conspiracy moves through the ship with practiced silence. These are men who've spent years learning to walk on creaking boards without making noise, who can navigate below deck in total darkness by memory and touch alone. You've chosen them carefully, not just for their loyalty to you, but for their competence. A mutiny stuffed by idiots is just a faster route to the gallows. You need navigators, gunners, experienced sailors who can actually run a warship once you've stolen it. The captain is asleep in his cabin, which makes this easier than it could have been. You enter with 3 other men, and he wakes to find himself surrounded. To his credit, he doesn't scream or reach for a weapon. He's a practical man who can count to 4 and recognize when resistance is suicide. You explain the situation in calm, almost apologetic tones. The crew is taking the ship. He can cooperate and be put ashore safely, or he can resist and learn how quickly cooperation can be enforced. He chooses wisdom over heroism. The few officers loyal to the captain are similarly neutralized, locked in their cabins, disarmed, informed that their immediate futures depend entirely on their ability to keep quiet. There's no violence, no blood, no dramatic sword fights. This isn't a theatrical production. It's a carefully executed theft. The kind of thing that only works if everyone involved understands that efficiency matters more than pride. By the time the first hints of dawn start threatening the eastern horizon, you've secured the ship without firing a shot or raising an alarm. Now comes the moment that transforms theft into something larger. You gather the crew on deck, and in the grey pre-dawn light, you hold what might be the most important election in your life. The question is simple: who will captain the Fancy? Because yes, you've already renamed her in your head. The Charles II was a ship that belonged to indifferent investors and broken promises. What you're creating needs a new identity. The crew's vote is nearly unanimous. Your name shouted into the darkness with an enthusiasm that's part celebration, part relief, part reckless excitement at what they've just done. You're no longer first mate. You're captain every now, and the weight of that title settles on you like a physical thing. Every decision from this moment forward is yours. Every success, every failure, every man's life on this ship is your responsibility. It's intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. The first order of business is practical, painting over the old name. By the time the sun fully rises, Charles II has been erased, replaced with Fancy in fresh paint that probably won't fool anyone who looks closely but doesn't need to. It's a symbolic transformation, the ship shedding her old identity like a snake shedding skin. Weighing anchor feels like the most significant physical act of your life. The rope straining through the capstan, the anchor breaking free from the harbour bottom, the ship responding to the sails as they catch the morning wind. Each sensation is amplified because you know what it means. You're leaving, not just Spain, but your entire previous life. There's no returning from this. You've crossed a line that exists in law books and international treaties, and the only direction now is forward. Spain shrinks behind you, Corunna Harbour becoming a smudge on the horizon, then a memory, then nothing at all. The open ocean spreads ahead, and for the first time in months, maybe years, you feel the pure, uncomplicated sensation of freedom. No investors to answer to, no bureaucrats to placate, no wages withheld. The ship is yours, the crew chose you, and the world is full of targets. The men below deck are experiencing their own version of this intoxication. You can hear it in their voices, see it in their movements. The nervous energy of men who've just committed an irreversible act and are discovering that the consequences might actually be glorious instead of catastrophic. They're laughing, making plans, already imagining the wealth that awaits. You let them have this moment because they've earned it, and because their morale is your most valuable resource. A crew that believes in their captain and their mission can accomplish things that defy logic. A crew that doubts is just a collection of individuals waiting to betray each other. You've given them belief, and now you need to deliver on the implicit promise that this gamble will make them rich, famous, or ideally both. Your first decision as captain is where to hunt. Not Spain, too close, too obvious, and you're not ready to start an international incident quite yet. The Mediterranean is too crowded with naval patrols. The Atlantic shipping lanes are competitive, full of other pirates and privateers. But the Indian Ocean, that's a theatre of possibility. The trade routes are thick with merchant vessels carrying goods from the Mughal Empire, from Persia, from the Spice Islands. The East India Company ships haul fortunes with inadequate protection. And perhaps most importantly, it's far enough from Europe that news travels slowly, and authority is diffused across competing empires. You plot a course south and east, toward waters where the fancy can become legendary instead of just notorious. The horizon is yours, and standing at the helm with the wind in your face and the taste of salt on your lips, you understand that you've just authored your own origin story. Months from now, people will whisper about this night, the bloodless seizure, the democratic election, the transformation from forgotten sailors into something that empires will fear. But that's future myth-making. Right now, in this moment, you're simply a man who saw an opportunity and took it, who convinced others to join him in organized madness, and who is sailing toward a destiny that's entirely self-determined. The Charles II is dead. Long live the fancy. And long live Captain Henry Every, who is about to learn that taking a ship is the easy part. It's everything that comes after that tests whether you're truly worthy of the legend you're creating. You're no longer Henry Every, respectable sailor, who once believed in wages and legitimate employment. You're Long Ben now, a name the crew started using somewhere between Gibraltar and the Cape of Good Hope. And it's stuck because it sounds like the kind of name that belongs in tavern songs and wanted posters. The Indian Ocean sprawls before you like a marketplace designed by empires. Dutch East India Company ships hauling spices and silk, Portuguese vessels carrying African gold, English merchants moving textiles and tea, and Mughal ships fat with pilgrimage wealth. Every flag represents a different level of diplomatic catastrophe if you attack it, which means every flag represents opportunity if you're willing to accept that your relationship with civilization is permanently severed. Your first raids are educational in ways the Royal Navy never taught. You target a small Portuguese merchant vessel off the Malabar coast. Undermanned, poorly armed, carrying a modest cargo of pepper and indigo. The approach is textbook. Raise no flags until you're close enough that running is pointless. Then show your guns and wait for them to do the math. The Portuguese captain weighs his options for maybe 30 seconds before striking his colours, and you board to find exactly what you expected. Trade goods worth taking. A crew worth sparing because dead men generate revenge while living witnesses generate fear. You let them keep their ship and enough supplies to reach port because the story they'll tell is worth more than their lives. The brutal education continues with each encounter, and you're learning the calculus that separates successful pirates from dead ones. When to show mercy, when the target surrenders immediately, when they're carrying intelligence about other ships, when letting them go creates more fear than killing them. When to kill, when they resist stupidly, when they might identify you to authorities, when an example needs to be set. It's not personal, it's business arithmetic. Dead merchants don't spread your reputation. Terrified merchants become your marketing department, telling stories that grow with each retelling until ships start surrendering at the sight of your sails. You're building a network because lone wolves don't survive in these waters. You need informants in port cities who'll tell you which ships are sailing when, corrupt officials who'll look the other way for a percentage, other pirate captains who'll share intelligence and occasionally coordinate on larger targets. Some of this network is bought with coin, some is built on mutual benefit, and some is maintained through reputation. You keep your word when you make deals, and you're creatively vicious to anyone who breaks theirs. Trust among criminals is fragile, but it exists, maintained through the understanding that betrayal has consequences more immediate than any legal system could provide. The smell becomes a constant companion, gunpowder residue that clings to everything, salt air thick enough to taste, and blood drying on deck planks in the tropical heat. You've stopped noticing the last one, which probably says something about how quickly humans can normalize horror when it's routine. After a raid, the crew swabs the decks and the red water runs through the scuppers, and by the next morning, it's like it never happened, except for the new goods in the hold and the stories the men tell themselves to sleep at night. Your growing notoriety becomes tangible. Ships see the Fancy's sails on the horizon and immediately change course, running even though you're not close enough to identify yet. That's when you know you've achieved something rare. Your reputation arrives before you do. Merchants who've never seen you know your name. The Dutch East India Company starts assigning armed escorts to vulnerable routes. The Portuguese petition their king for increased naval protection. You're becoming the name people mention first. And in the economy of fear, brand recognition is everything. The balance becomes your obsession because you're managing something more volatile than gunpowder, human loyalty purchased with stolen wealth. The crew needs to stay fed, wealthy, and loyal. Everyone gets their percentage based on rank and contribution, calculated openly so no one suspects you're skimming. And they need to believe in you, because mutiny is always possible when the mutineers are already mutineers. You threw off one captain. What stops them from throwing off another? The answer is success. As long as you keep making them richer and keeping them alive, they'll follow you into positions that seem suicidal right up until they're not. The rumours spreading through port cities have a life of their own now. Long Ben Every is 10 feet tall. He never loses a battle. He drinks the blood of captured captains. None of it's true, but you don't correct the record because useful lies are more valuable than boring truth. Let them think you're a supernatural force rather than just a competent sailor with good timing and flexible morals. Legends are harder to catch than people. Then you hear the whispers about the Mughal treasure fleet, and everything changes. The information comes in fragments over weeks. A Dutch trader mentions the annual pilgrimage ships. A corrupt English factor lets slip the timing. A captured Portuguese navigator has maps. You piece it together like a puzzle. 25 ships sailing together once a year, carrying pilgrims and tribute to Mecca, guarded but not as heavily as they should be. Among them, the Ganj-i-Sawai, the emperor's own ship, the largest in the Indian Ocean, carrying the accumulated wealth of an empire's most powerful families. It's the kind of target that's so ambitious it circles back around to being feasible, because no one thinks anyone would be crazy enough to try it. You stand on the Fancy's deck at sunset, and you make a decision that will define everything that follows. You're going after the Mughal fleet. Not for routine cargo or modest profits, but for a prize so large that one successful raid could make you wealthy beyond any legitimate sailor's dreams. It's possible you'll die trying. It's possible you'll ignite an international incident that will make you the most wanted man alive. But it's also possible you'll pull off something no pirate has ever accomplished and vanish into legend with a fortune that emperors would envy. You call the crew together and tell them you found something worth dying for, which is fortunate because you're about to ask them to risk exactly that. You're obsessed now, and obsession in the Indian Ocean heat feels like a fever you can't sweat out. Every conversation in every port, every captured sailor, every bribed official becomes a source of intelligence about the Mughal treasure fleet. You need to know everything. The exact departure date from Surat, the planned route across the Arabian Sea, the number of escort vessels, the defensive capabilities of the Ganj-i-Sawai herself. This isn't a raid you can improvise. This is a military operation disguised as piracy. And the difference between wealth beyond imagination and dying in chains comes down to preparation. You spend weeks gathering information, cross-referencing stories, building a picture of the fleet's patterns. The pilgrimage happens annually, which means the route is predictable. The Mughals rely on the journey's religious significance for protection, assuming no one would be insane enough to attack ships carrying faithful Muslims to Mecca. They're about to learn that insanity and ambition look identical from a distance. The mathematics become clear. You can't do this alone. The Fancy is fast and well-armed, but she's one ship against 25, and even the most favorable odds require backup. You need a squadron, which means forming alliances with other pirate captains, men whose relationship with trust is professionally complicated. You find them in the usual places: Thomas Tew, an American pirate with a reputation for competence; Joseph Faro, whose moral compass points exclusively toward profit; William May, who captains the Pearl, and has the kind of crew that asks questions only after the fighting starts. You meet in a secluded cove off the Malabar coast, and the negotiation is exactly as tense as you'd expect when dividing treasure that doesn't exist yet among men who kill people for a living. Everyone wants the largest share. Everyone suspects everyone else of planning betrayal. You broker a deal where shares are proportional to each ship's contribution, with bonuses for whoever engages the primary target first. It's not perfect, but it's sufficient, and in piracy, sufficient is often the best you can hope for. The Indian Ocean becomes your hunting ground in a way it hasn't been before. This isn't opportunistic raiding. This is a coordinated search pattern across thousands of square miles of water, waiting for intelligence that the fleet has departed Surat. Your ships spread out along the likely routes, maintaining just enough contact to signal when the target is spotted. Days bleed into weeks. The crew grows restless because waiting is harder than fighting, and restless sailors create problems that range from petty disputes to serious violence. You manage it by keeping them busy: drills, maintenance, anything to burn off the nervous energy of men who know they're about to attempt something that will either make them legends or corpses. Supplies start running low. The water barrels develop that stale taste that comes from sitting too long in tropical heat. Doubts creep into conversations. Maybe the fleet took a different route. Maybe the intelligence was wrong. Maybe you've gambled everything on a target that's already safely in Mecca. The tension within your pirate squadron grows toxic. Trust was thin to begin with. Prolonged waiting without results makes it thinner. Thomas Tew starts making noise about breaking off to find easier targets. Joseph Faro suggests maybe the whole thing was a fantasy based on exaggerated rumors. You hold the alliance together through a combination of persuasion and thinly veiled threats, reminding everyone that the Mughal treasure is real and that breaking formation now means surrendering the greatest prize in the Indian Ocean to whoever has the patience to wait. But you can feel the coalition fracturing, held together only by greed and the sunk cost fallacy of having already invested weeks into the hunt. If the fleet doesn't appear soon, your carefully constructed squadron will dissolve into individual ships pursuing individual interests, and the opportunity will die with it. Then, September 1695, the call comes from the lookout that changes everything. Sails on the horizon, not one or two, but dozens. The Mughal fleet, exactly where your intelligence predicted it would be, sailing in loose formation across the Arabian Sea. You can see them through your telescope. Merchant vessels, pilgrim ships, and there, in the center of the formation like a jewel in a crown, the Ganj-i-Sawai. She's massive, dwarfing every other vessel in sight, her hull painted and decorated in a way that announces wealth and importance even from a distance. Your hands are shaking slightly as you lower the telescope, and you're not sure if it's excitement or terror, or the simple physiological response to adrenaline flooding your system. This is the moment. Everything you've planned, everything you've risked, everything you've gambled on the assumption that audacity can overcome impossible odds, it all comes down to what happens in the next few hours. You signal the other pirate ships, and the squadron closes formation. The plan forms in whispered conferences between captains. Isolate the Ganj-i-Sawai from her escorts. Overwhelm her defensive capabilities before she can organize effective resistance, board her fast and secure the treasure before reinforcements can arrive. It sounds simple when reduced to 3 steps, but you know that plans dissolve into chaos the moment the first cannon fires. Still, you have advantages: surprise, desperation, and crews that have nothing to lose. The Mughal ships think they're safe this far from shore. They're about to learn that safety is an illusion purchased with vigilance, and their vigilance has been inadequate. The Ganj-i-Sawai grows larger on the horizon, and you can make out details now. The gun ports along her sides, the crowds of people on deck, the flags that mark her as the Emperor's vessel. She's beautiful in the way that anything representing obscene wealth is beautiful, and you're about to destroy that beauty in the most profitable act of vandalism in human history. You give the order to close distance and prepare for engagement. The crew moves with practiced efficiency, loading guns, sharpening weapons, tying back anything that might become a hazard during boarding action. No one's joking now. The usual gallows humor that sustains sailors through danger has evaporated, replaced by focused silence. They know what you know. There's no turning back from this, and in a few hours they'll either be richer than they ever imagined, or dead in water that's about to turn red with consequences. September 7th, 1695. The date will be remembered by empires, but right now it's just another morning where the sun rises over the Arabian Sea and turns the water into hammered bronze. You've spent the night closing distance, and now the Mughal fleet is close enough that you can hear the sounds carrying across the water. Voices, bells, the general noise of hundreds of people who don't yet know they're about to be attacked. Your first target isn't the Ganj-i-Sawai directly. It's her escort, the Fateh Muhammad, because you need to eliminate her protective screen before committing to the main prize. The signal goes up, and suddenly the morning silence shatters into the organized chaos of naval warfare. Cannons roar, the sound so loud it feels like it's happening inside your skull. Smoke billows across the water, making visibility a guessing game. The Fateh Muhammad returns fire, and you feel the impacts shudder through the Fancy's hull as shot tears through rigging and splinters wood. The engagement is brutal but brief. The Fateh Muhammad is outgunned and outnumbered, and her captain makes the fatal mistake of trying to fight rather than run. Within an hour, she's crippled, and you leave Thomas Tew's crew to secure her while you turn your attention to the real target. The Ganj-i-Sawai has seen what happened to her escort and is trying to escape, sails unfurled, attempting to use her size to outdistance your smaller, faster ships. It's a reasonable strategy that fails immediately because you've positioned your squadron to cut off her escape routes. She's trapped, and she knows it, which makes her dangerous in the way that cornered animals are dangerous. Her gun ports open, and she fires a broadside that screams through the air close enough that you feel the displaced air. One of your forward guns takes a direct hit, killing 3 men instantly and turning a section of deck into an abattoir of splinters and body parts you'll identify later if there's time. Then fortune, pure, stupid, impossible fortune, intervenes in the form of a lucky shot. One of your cannons, fired by a gunner whose name you don't even know, impacts the Ganj-i-Sawai's mainmast at exactly the right angle with exactly the right force. You watch it happen in the kind of slow motion that only exists in memory. The mast shudders, cracks spiderweb through the wood, and then the entire structure comes crashing down in an explosion of rigging and canvas that buries half her deck. Without her mainmast, she's crippled, unable to maneuver, effectively a floating fortress that can't move. Her other ships scatter, captains making the calculation that saving themselves is smarter than dying to protect cargo that isn't theirs. You can't blame them. You'd do the same. Boarding is where naval warfare stops being strategic and becomes intimate violence. You throw grappling hooks that bite into her rails, pull the ships close enough that the gap can be crossed with planks and rope, and then your crew pours onto the Ganj-i-Sawai's deck in a wave of desperate, armed men who've been promised a fortune if they can take this ship. The resistance is fiercer than you expected. Guards, crew members, even some passengers pick up weapons, and fight because the alternative is surrender to pirates, and they've heard the stories about what that means. The fighting is close-quarters brutality, cutlasses, pistols fired at point-blank range, men grappling and stabbing and beating each other with whatever's available. There's no romance here, no honourable dueling, just the ugly mechanics of humans trying to kill each other while slipping on blood-slicked deck planks. The violence continues below deck, and this is where the raid crosses into territory you'll never fully discuss in any tavern story. The official record will say you took the ship. It won't mention the specifics of how cooperation was secured from passengers who initially refused, or what methods were employed to discover where valuables were hidden, or what happened to people who resisted after organised resistance collapsed. You don't participate in all of it. You're busy securing the ship and organising the transfer of cargo, but you hear it, and hearing is a form of complicity that will live in the space between your thoughts and sleep for whatever remains of your life. This is the cost of the greatest heist in history, and it's denominated in things that can't be calculated in pounds sterling. But the treasure, God in heaven, the treasure, chests of gold coins that take 4 men to lift, jewels that catch the light and throw rainbows across blood-stained walls, precious metals worked into ornaments and religious artifacts, silk and ivory, and items whose value you can't even calculate because you've never seen their like before. The hold of the Ganj-i-Sawai is a cross-section of Mughal wealth, accumulated from an empire's richest families sending tribute and treasure for the pilgrimage. You start counting and give up because the numbers become meaningless. Estimates will later place it at $600,000, more wealth than most European nations have in their treasuries, more than any pirate has ever taken in a single action, more than any legitimate sailor could earn in 100 lifetimes. You're holding a fortune in your hands, and your hands are literally shaking. The crew's reaction is predictable and frightening in equal measure. They've just committed murder for money, and the money is so vast that it justifies everything they've done and everything they might have to do. They're drunk on wealth and adrenaline, fighting over shares even as they're loading the fancy with plunder. You have to restore order through a combination of authority and pragmatism. Everyone gets their share per the agreement, but only if they shut up and start transferring cargo efficiently before Mughal warships arrive to investigate why their emperor's ship is sitting dead in the water. The division of spoils takes hours, calculated openly so no one can claim they were cheated. Your captain's share is substantial, more money than you've seen in your entire life accumulated into a single afternoon's work. You stand amid the wreckage as the sun sets on September 7th, 1695, and you understand with complete clarity that you've just committed the crime of the century. The Ganj-i-Sawai is a gutted shell, her deck littered with the evidence of what happened here. Your crew is loading the last of the treasure onto the Fancy and the other squadron ships. And somewhere, in Surat and Delhi and London, and a dozen other capitals, the news is beginning to spread that someone attacked the Grand Mughal's treasure ship and got away with a fortune that emperors would envy. You've just sparked an international incident that will have consequences you can't possibly predict. But right now, with $600,000 in plunder secured and the horizon empty of pursuit, you allow yourself a moment of pure amoral triumph. You won. Against impossible odds, against an empire, against every reasonable expectation of how this should have ended, you won. The celebration can wait. Right now, you need to vanish before the entire world comes looking for you. The crew is still celebrating when you're already calculating escape routes, which is the difference between pirates who become legends and pirates who become cautionary tales. Below deck, men are drunk on stolen wine and the kind of euphoria that comes from surviving something that should have killed them. They're counting coins, trying on looted jewelry, telling increasingly exaggerated versions of their own heroism during the boarding action. You let them have this moment because they've earned it, but you're not joining the celebration. You're standing at your charts, mapping routes that avoid major ports, calculating how long before news of the Ganj-i-Sawai raid reaches authorities who can actually do something about it. The answer is not long enough. The news spreads faster than you anticipated. carried by the surviving Mughal ships that scattered during the attack. Within weeks, it reaches Surat, where the East India Company factors realize they have a diplomatic catastrophe brewing. The Grand Mughal, Aurangzeb himself, an emperor who controls more wealth and military power than most of Europe combined, is not the kind of man who accepts the robbery and violation of his ships with philosophical detachment. He's furious in the way that only absolute monarchs can be furious, which is to say, his anger has the weight of state policy behind it. He doesn't just want revenge, he wants examples made. And the closest European presence is the East India Company, whose merchants suddenly find themselves imprisoned, their factories seized, their trade routes closed until England delivers the pirates responsible. Back in London, the Privy Council receives the news and understands immediately that this isn't just piracy, it's a threat to England's entire economic presence in India. The East India Company is hemorrhaging money with every day that Mughal trade remains suspended. The political pressure is immense. They need a scapegoat, preferably a court one, to demonstrate that England takes this seriously. The bounty is announced, $1,000 for information leading to your capture. In 1696, that's an amount that could set up a family for life, buy estates, purchase titles. It's enough money that every bounty hunter, every opportunistic sailor, every desperate debtor suddenly has motivation to remember if they've seen Henry Every or any of his crew. You've just become the subject of history's first truly international manhunt, coordinated across empires that usually compete but now share a common interest in seeing you hang. Your crew starts getting arrested almost immediately, which is grimly predictable. Pirates are notoriously bad at keeping low profiles when they suddenly have money. Some get caught in ports, spending too freely, paying for everything with coins that are too foreign and too valuable to be legitimate. Others are betrayed by associates who decide $1,000 is worth more than loyalty to men they barely knew. A few are simply unlucky, recognized from descriptions, detained on suspicion, identified by witnesses from the Ganj-i-Sawai who survived. Each arrest leads to interrogation, and interrogation leads to more names, more descriptions, more details about where the fancy was headed after the raid. The network of information tightens like a noose, and you're watching your accomplices disappear one by one into custody. The betrayals cut deeper than the arrests. Men you trusted, sailed with, fought beside, shared profits with, start selling information to save themselves. They tell authorities about your plans, your habits, your possible destinations. Some do it hoping for clemency. Others do it for reward money. A few probably do it out of spite, settling old grudges now that the consequences have caught up. You learn about each betrayal through your remaining network of informants, and each one reinforces a lesson you should have learned earlier. In piracy, loyalty lasts exactly as long as it's profitable, and the moment self-preservation conflicts with alliance, self-preservation wins. You can't even be angry about it. You'd probably do the same in their position. Paranoia becomes your constant companion, more reliable than any crew member. Every port is potentially hostile. Every face could belong to a bounty hunter or informant. Every conversation might be someone trying to extract information to sell. You start seeing threats everywhere because threats are everywhere. The fancy herself becomes a liability, too recognizable, too associated with the raid. You consider scuttling her, renaming her again, selling her to smugglers who'll ask no questions. Sleep becomes difficult. When you do sleep, you wake at every unusual sound, hand automatically reaching for weapons. This is the price of the greatest heist in history. You're rich beyond imagination and hunted by everyone with the resources to hunt you. The decision to split the crew is tactical necessity disguised as strategy. Smaller groups are harder to track, easier to hide, less likely to draw attention. You divide what remains of your loyal men into separate parties with instructions to scatter across different continents and maintain absolute silence about their involvement. Some head to the American colonies. Others disappear into the Caribbean. A few try to blend into European port cities, hoping their share of the treasure can buy new identities and comfortable anonymity. You give them what advice you can. Spend slowly, trust no one, assume every letter is intercepted and every conversation monitored. Most will ignore this advice and get caught anyway, but at least you tried. The weight of the treasure becomes literal and metaphorical simultaneously. You're carrying more wealth than most people see in lifetimes, but it's too much to move easily, too recognizable to spend openly, too dangerous to deposit anywhere legitimate. Large denominations of foreign coins attract attention. Jewelry has to be fenced through channels that ask questions. Even gold has to be converted carefully, in small amounts, through intermediaries who take substantial cuts for the risk. You're discovering that stealing a fortune is the easy part. It's converting that fortune into usable wealth without getting caught that requires real genius. Every transaction is a risk. Every middleman is a potential informant. The treasure that seemed like ultimate freedom is becoming an anchor, weighing you down with complications you never anticipated. By mid-1696, the manhunt has reached global scale. Your description circulates in ports from London to Bombay to Boston. The Privy Council, the East India Company, and the Mughal Empire are coordinating resources in unprecedented ways, united by their desire to make an example of you. Naval patrols increase in every major shipping route. Port authorities scrutinize strangers more carefully. The wanted posters multiply, your face rendered by artists who've never seen you, but have worked from witness descriptions into something that's recognizable enough to be dangerous. You've achieved fame, just not the kind that comes with comfort. Every nation with maritime trade interests wants you dead or captured, preferably in ways that involve public spectacle and prolonged suffering as a deterrent to future pirates. You've become the most wanted man alive, and your greatest achievement is that you're still alive to know it. June 1696. Henry. Every disappears from history as completely as if he never existed, and what follows is the most successful part of your entire criminal career, the absolute total erasure of your identity. You don't die dramatically in a final battle. You don't get captured and hanged in a public spectacle. You simply stop being findable, which is harder than stealing the treasure in the first place. The manhunt continues for years, searchers combing ports and questioning witnesses. But they're looking for a man who no longer exists in any documentable form. You've done what every criminal dreams of and almost none achieve. You've won completely and vanished into the silence that follows victory. The deliberate erasure begins with the obvious, changing your name, altering your appearance, destroying anything that connects you to Captain Henry Every or Long Ben. You shave the beard, cut your hair differently, adopt different posture and speech patterns. You become someone unremarkable, the kind of person eyes slide past without registering. This is harder than it sounds because you've spent years cultivating presence. The command bearing of a pirate captain doesn't switch off easily. You have to unlearn authority, practice being forgettable, train yourself to blend into crowds rather than dominate rooms. Every instinct developed during your piracy years has to be suppressed because those instincts make you recognizable, and recognizable means dead. The theories about what happened to you multiply in inverse proportion to actual evidence. Some claim you retired to a tropical island. Madagascar is popular in the rumors, or some unnamed Caribbean paradise where you live like a king among natives who don't care about English warrants. Others insist you returned to Britain under an assumed identity, living quietly in some provincial town where no one would think to look for a legendary pirate. The darkest theory suggests you were swindled by the merchants you tried to fence your treasure through, left destitute, and dying in anonymity after the very people you trusted to convert your wealth betrayed you for profit. Each theory has proponents who swear they've heard credible accounts, but none have evidence that survives scrutiny. The treasure's fate is equally mysterious, which is exactly how you planned it. No massive deposits appear in any banks. No sudden aristocratic purchases trace back to suspicious sources. The $600,000 simply vanishes from the traceable economy, as thoroughly as you vanish from public record. Either you've hidden it so well that it'll never be found, or you've spent it so carefully over decades that no single transaction drew attention, or someone else has it and isn't advertising the fact. The manhunt specifically targets the money. Authorities know that wealth this large can't be spent invisibly, but somehow you manage exactly that impossibility. Years later, treasure hunters will search for every's lost fortune the way they search for El Dorado, convinced that somewhere there's a cache of Mughal gold waiting to be discovered. Your crew's legacy provides the cautionary counterpoint to your success. 6 of them are captured and hanged in London in 1696. Their trial, a public spectacle designed to demonstrate that piracy has consequences. Their names are recorded, their confessions documented, their deaths witnessed by crowds who came for entertainment. Others are arrested throughout the 1690s in various ports, some hanged, others imprisoned, a few managing lesser sentences by cooperating fully with authorities. They become the official story, the pirates who robbed the Ganj-i-Sawai and paid the price. You're conspicuously absent from their company, which makes you either the smartest or the luckiest, and at this point, the distinction doesn't matter. The manhunt continues long after any reasonable expectation of success. The bounty remains active for years. Ships' captains are questioned about suspicious passengers. Port authorities maintain vigilance for anyone matching your description or spending suspicious amounts of foreign currency. The East India Company, having suffered substantial diplomatic and economic damage, pursues leads with the persistence of institutional grudge-holding. The Mughal Empire never formally withdraws its interest in your capture, but decades pass, and the active search gradually transforms into bureaucratic habit, paperwork filed, reports submitted, no actual expectation that Henry Every will suddenly materialize after evading capture this long. Death comes for you sometime between 1699 and 1714, if historians' estimates are accurate, though even this is speculation based on the absence of sightings rather than any confirmed evidence. No grave bears your name. No death certificate records your passing. No witnesses report your final moments. You die as anonymously as you lived after vanishing, which might be the ultimate victory or the ultimate tragedy depending on how you measure success. Did you die wealthy, surrounded by comfort purchased with Mughal gold? Or destitute, swindled out of everything and too paranoid to seek help? Did you spend your final years in tropical luxury or cold British poverty? History will never know. If you survived the immediate aftermath, if you managed to convert enough treasure to live comfortably and stayed disciplined enough to remain hidden, then your life after 1696 must have been a special kind of torture. Every knock on the door sounds like arrest. Every stranger's glance feels like recognition. You can never tell your real story, never claim credit for the greatest heist in history, never relax into the certainty that you're truly safe. You're rich, but forever looking over your shoulder, successful, but unable to celebrate, free but imprisoned by paranoia. The treasure buys comfort, but not peace. The perfect escape comes with the price of eternal vigilance. Your legend outlives whatever reality you inhabited after vanishing. A general history of the pirates, published in 1724, includes your story, already mythologized and exaggerated. You become inspiration for other pirates who see proof that it's possible to win completely and escape consequences. Your name appears in ballads, pamphlets, theatrical productions, always the pirate who got away, the one who beat the system so thoroughly that even his ending is a mystery. You wanted to become legend, and you succeeded, but the cost was erasing the man entirely. Henry Every becomes pure story, unanchored to verifiable truth, which might be exactly what you wanted or the cruelest possible outcome. The final irony: you pulled off the impossible twice, first stealing history's greatest treasure, then vanishing so completely that no one knows if you won or lost. The silence that follows is more absolute than any grave, more complete than any execution. You became the question mark that history can't answer, the ghost that haunts every unsolved mystery. And maybe that's the perfect ending for a man who understood that the greatest trick isn't committing the crime. It's making sure no one ever knows how the story truly ends.